How's it going? And welcome to episode 170 of On the Wire. Proud member of the Pitcher List Podcast Network. Follow the pod on the Twitter at On the Wire Pod. I am Adam Howe. You can follow me at 80 Grade. That's all spelled out. Kevin Hastings is at Hastings Kevin. And we have a great show for you lined up today as we hit episode 170 of On the Wire. We got a couple debuts to talk about. We've got injury notes to talk about and an actual signing in the middle of the season, which is always fun, and in a major league deal for that matter. But Kevin, we got a lot to talk about before we get into all that. How you doing? Glad to be back with you.
Yeah, it's awesome, and even more so than usual. This is one of, if not my favorite part of most weeks is recording this podcast with you and talking baseball. But it's been a very hectic week. Got a lot going on. That big home project that I have referred to a couple of times is beginning next week. So I've been prepping for that. I have a buddy coming from the mainland to help me. That's great. That means we have to get it done in 3 days so that we can enjoy a 4-day weekend while he's here visiting. As far as fantasy baseball teams, um, I had a 3 to 4 week really bad stretch. As we were talking off air right before we started recording, early in the season, I'd say at this portion of the podcast, dodging bullets.
Right.
Well, that stopped. And I was no longer dodging. I was free falling a little bit, got that halted and even started to make the turn and climbing back up. So things are going fairly well. But this week, even more than most, I am so happy to be here talking baseball with you, Adam.
Yeah, I mean the injury bug was not hitting me that hard at the beginning of the season either, and as we were talking about off air right before we started, in my IL league where I do have the spots, I have the flexibility.
You have an
It's not
all-star
unlimited
IL team.
ILs; it's still 10, and I've got 12 sitting there right now, so I've got to make some decisions there. And they're all worthy players of holding on to in most situations.
Absolutely.
Couple of stashes. We'll see what they do, but I didn't have to make these decisions until recently, and some of them we're going to talk about in this first section here with a couple of injuries hitting the IL in the news section. So let's get right into that as we get into. Let's just get these injuries out of the way at the very beginning here, Kevin. We saw Kyle Schwarber and Bryce Harper leave Thursday's game early. Schwarber left with some groin tightness and Harper left with some hamstring issue. Both have since been placed on the IL. Not expecting either one of them maybe to hold onto that designation for too long. Cross your fingers, knock on wood, whatever you need to do. But that does mean at the very least we'll have some opening playing time in Philadelphia for the next playing week. What adjustments do you think we can make? This is going to impact some Faab bidding based on somebody's going to get some extra playing time. What are you expecting to see in Philadelphia for at least for the next 10 days?
Well, hopefully these are both fairly short term. And I am hopeful that that's the case. As we were talking, I have them both on one team, and it's actually my CLQ online championship. So
Ouch. Okay.
that's pretty rough. But I think we know for the lineup today, Friday, as we're recording, Cody Clemens back off the IL playing first base. Johan Rojas back off the IL playing center field. I think that is probably what we see versus righties. We may see Edmundo Sosa get a little more playing time again, like we had been used to when Trey Turner was out, and he performed. He was valuable to deep league teams when he was getting the playing time. He's not in the lineup today. And I think we'll see Christian Pache versus lefties, probably. Maybe David Dahl starts to get a little more playing time again. But I don't think there's much other than in a league where you're really churning your roster every week, like very shallow leagues. Because even in 12s, I don't know that there's going to be enough here. But keep an eye on it over the weekend. If Clemens is going to get the starts versus all righties at first base, maybe even a lefty or two, then he might be worth taking a look at. But I don't see a lot. In fact, I was just thinking as I was looking at the pitching matchups for the next couple of weeks, all of a sudden I'm not so scared of Philadelphia. When sure, the entire lineup has been great all year, but Bryce Harper and Kyle Schwarber have a whole lot to do with that.
Yeah, I mean, we're missing JT Realmuto as well. So this
Yeah.
lineup is not, what it
He's
once.
also on that OC team, by the way.
Oh, good. Yes, nice. So you did the Philly stack on that one. It appears, which for most of the season so far has worked out nicely for you, I'm sure. But as of recent, uh, yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of moving parts here. That they not that Philly's bench is like super deep, but we've already seen them kind of struggle through this. Obviously, with Trey Turner going down and some other injuries here or there. And so it'll be interesting to see. Doesn't seem like any one player is going to get like all of their playing time that they leave on the table. It's a lot of playing time. I mean, Schwarber's playing every day. Obviously, Harper's playing every day in various capacities. So it looks like, yeah, more of a mix and match. But any extra playing time is worth your eyes, even especially in like a weekly format where you only care about what they're going to do next week. We'll stay in Philadelphia for more injury news. Unfortunately, Spencer Turnbull, as quickly as he returned to the rotation, he just as quickly exits the rotation as he got hurt with a right lat strain. He'll be out for what looks like a minimum of 6 up to 8 weeks moving forward. As Rob Thompson then mentioned that Mikhail Mercado would get the first shot at the 5th rotation spot for Philadelphia. And he mentioned that before Turnbull's kind of timeline was kind of expected. So are you still expecting to see Mercado out there? Do you have any interest in Mercado at this point? Is there anybody else kind of like in the wings at this point? Turnbull wasn't even in the rotation. They moved him back into the rotation. They probably should never have taken him out of the rotation. That's a whole another argument. But now, he finally found his way back in and now he's out. So is Mercado the obvious choice here, or do you expect him to stick around? Do you have any interest there?
I think he's going to be a part of this at a minimum. I don't know that we'll see a ton of innings out of him. Of course, roster resource does have him listed as the starting pitcher versus the Chicago Cubs on Tuesday at Wrigley and then at Atlanta over the weekend. So with the limited innings combined with the matchups, both of these teams, the Cubs a little less so. Atlanta's coming around, even without Ronald Acuna Jr. They're starting to put up some runs. Still a couple duds here and there, but not as disappointing as they had been as a team. I think I saw Austin Riley got a home run today. It's only his 9th, but maybe he's waking up. I just don't have a lot of interest, but I think he's going to be involved, whether it's as the starter that may not go 5 innings. Of course, I'd be more interested if I knew for certain he would be a follower in those games. But I think something like that is probably what the Phillies are going to do. And since there's such a big question mark and not horrible, but not great matchups either, I think I'm just going to leave it alone.
Yeah, they don't. I mean, the Phillies don't really have a ton of options either, unless they go
Right.
find somebody, who's DFA'd or whatever. But like waiting down in AAA, I'm seeing Max Castillo and Kobe Allard, who yeah, have some starting experience, and they're currently, from all things I can tell, they're starting down in AAA at the moment as well. Freddie Tarnock, as well. I mean, nobody that I'm jumping at the bit to spend my Faab on if they were to get a call to replace him. So just, for the time being, seeing Mercado, even if he doesn't, go a full, 4 or 5 innings and he's more of a bulk guy and they do a couple bullpen games until, they can right that ship. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. If that's what happens. Well, we got somebody found a new home, as we haven't seen the likes of Matthew Boyd on the mound in quite some time. He will find his new home staying Staying in the AL Central, but heading down south from Detroit to Cleveland, where he gets picked up by the Guardians. I mean, the Guardians have obviously a history, or at least a narrative, whether it's founded or not at this point. Sure, it can be up for debate. Anything can be up for debate. Of just being a place where, being a pitcher factory. Maybe that's more so bringing up pitchers from the minors through their system and then seeing them succeed at the major league level. But can they do a reclamation project in Matthew Boyd, or do you have enough confidence in them where you're actually going to take interest in this new landing spot?
I'm definitely interested. Loved Alex Fast's tweet. We are so back, right?
Did not
Matthew
waste
Boyd is
any
back.
time on that. No.
Loved it. But I am interested for all the reasons you mentioned. I think I do still trust Cleveland a little bit, but I don't think it's going to have as much to do with that as it is he healthy? And if he is, how long it takes him to get built back up. This is not somebody I'm going to add right now, but it is somebody I'm going to pay attention to. And maybe over the next week or two, if things are going well, as he begins to build back up in the minors, I might, grab him while he's a dollar or two. Don't wait until we know he's starting and he's $15-$20, right?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we've gone down this road already. Well, a couple times probably with Matthew Boyd. It's like, all right, yeah, pick him up, maybe stash him for an extra week, and then see how he does. And then it just turns out he's not going to do anything. But
Or he
so
gets hurt again.
yeah, oh yeah, sure. So you'd
Yeah,
rather waste a dollar,
we've had that too. Yeah,
rather waste a dollar than the $20 for sure, if that's going to be the case. Yeah, I mean, that whole narrative with Cleveland, for me, it always goes back to something I read, and I cannot give credit to this. I apologize. But just the idea, I think it was when Bybee was coming up, and either he or somebody close to him had mentioned like one of the main reasons why Cleveland does so well with bringing pitchers up from AAA to majors, and where they can make that transition a little bit easier than some other organizations, is the way that they train their pitchers, and the information that they provide to them at that level mimics so much what they do at the major league level, so the transition is minimal at best. So I thought that was just a really cool anecdote to keep in mind, the way that the communication that an organization's minor league system works, and how they try to mimic what the major league team is doing, so that there's one less thing for a player to have to like transition into, as well. And I mean, it also seems as though Cleveland is just one of those organizations where you don't skip AAA. Also, we're seeing that a lot more often. I think we talked about it either last week or the week before. We're seeing that a whole lot more, where players skip AAA altogether, whether it's because here, and Nick Pollock talking about this on the Craft a couple weeks ago, where the idea that you have StatCast data at AAA now, and players
right.
literally don't want other teams to have that data on their players, so they just skip it altogether, and they spend a little bit more extra time at AA. And there's a couple other things that go into that. So just an interesting situation in Cleveland. Keep an eye on Matthew Boyd and what he ends up doing, and how they end up bringing him up and stretching him out, and where he actually spends his time, as well. All right, back to the injury related news here, Kevin. We have in Chicago for the Cubs, they are going to send Javier Assad to the IL with the right forearm extender strain. You hear forearm and strain in the same sentence. It's obviously never a good thing. In his place, they're going to throw Hayden Wesneski. Spoiler alert, not the only Hayden we're going to talk about today. And he is set for the rotation for the Cubs. Wesneski's had his moment in the rotation at one point or another. Now that he's in there, now I almost think just because he's out of the Chicago Cubs bullpen, he's destined to do well. As long as you're not in the bullpen for the Cubs, you have an opportunity of doing well. As long as you're in the bullpen for the Cubs, you probably aren't. at this stage. But now that you see Wisniewski in the starting role, is this a situation that, again, you're a little bit more interested in?
I I kind of am. And it's scary because he's had a home run problem recently. The hope was get him out of that bullpen. He stops giving up home runs, right? Alluding to what you were talking about
Mhm.
earlier. But in his most recent start, he gave up another 2 home runs in 4 innings, did have 7 strikeouts. That part was great. But he's given up 6 home runs in his last 11 innings, and that just is not gonna cut it. He has a couple of nice matchups coming up this week, probably. The way it appears to line up, we're gonna see Wisniewski get Philadelphia. Once again, I said that's a much I don't know how anybody would think that it's not a much more favorable matchup than it was yesterday. Maybe still not great, but that's 2 superstar hitters they have lost. And then Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim over the weekend. That start on Sunday, unless he just gets completely blown up against the Phillies, is what I'm really interested in. And but he's got to stop giving up the home runs for this to work. I think it's got to be a 15 team league or deeper, and I have to be desperate for wins and strikeouts, and not maybe I have to be in a spot whether it's I'm already to the point where my ratios are blown already, or I have a really good foundation. But there's some interest here in some leagues, but it, it's got to be the right spot, I think.
Yeah, yeah, fair enough. The last thing I really, it's not on here, but I did notice this the other day, Kevin. I wanted to get your take on the situation in Texas, where I just noticed our boy, and I can't say our boy because we haven't talked about him in like forever, and you very well may not be your boy anymore, but we talked about him a lot in the preseason, and that was um, Duran in Texas getting demoted by the Rangers. You know, was this just simply like just lack of production, or was this a strategic move by the Rangers, you think? And can you see him kind of coming back up in the hopefully near future, and kind of hit the ground running the way we kind of thought he might do going into the season?
He recently, over the past month or so, he wasn't getting much playing time at all early in the season. Recently, he had gotten more, and he wasn't performing amazingly, but he was contributing. Not necessarily to fantasy baseball teams, but I mean, there wasn't home runs, there wasn't stolen bases, but he was holding his own. I just think they've gotten pretty healthy. Uh, Corey Seager is back. Josh Smith. I know Josh Young had a setback recently, I believe, but I don't think they think it's anything horrible. We should still be getting him back. Wyatt Langford is hitting home runs now. That's great to see, and playing every single day. I think it was just a case of let's see. Let's see what Davis Wenzel can do. He was a first round draft pick just 5 years ago. Let's see what he can do. Robbie Grossman's always going to be on their roster, even if he doesn't play often. They like him. We saw that last season. He's going to be there. Derek
Speaking of the
Hill
franchise.
just got a couple of starts recently, Wednesday and Thursday, one against a lefty, one against a righty, and now he's out of the lineup today. That makes it difficult to know playing time, because is it just because, oh, he's only been here 3 days, he needs a day off? Now we got him, he's got 2 games in. I think it's just giving other guys a shot and trying to stir things up. Texas has been underperforming, and like I said, he wasn't doing anything at a superstar level. So I think they're just trying to see what they can find here.
Yeah, I thought it was just interesting. Obviously, he has the roster flexibility that we love as fantasy players, and
Right.
but
That's why even with the limited playing time, he was on a lot of my teams because he was my coverage at almost every position for Friday lineups, right?
and the irony is that once he was given like you said, he's been playing like every day. Before this demotion, he's only had 2 off days in the last like month and a half. He's just not
Mhm.
doing anything with it. It's like,
Right.
it's one of those things where it's like all you got to do is give somebody the playing time and see what he can do with it. All right, well, we kind of did see what he could do with it. Unfortunately, it just didn't go
I
in the
think maybe
direction
the
you're hoping.
I think in the right team context, if they let him go, that he probably could steal more bases. But I don't know that we're going to see the power we thought we might. I was at his first major league game live, and when he hit a 2-run home run that didn't win the game, but it definitely started a rally, and they came from behind to win, and I was like, ooh. And that's probably why I have a bias and have liked him a little more than I might have should have. But yeah, I just don't think the power I was hoping for is going to be there.
Kevin, I'm gonna warn you if this keeps happening with Michael Garcia, we're gonna have to have another deep dive so that it can automatically spin around because what we're seeing out of him in the last couple of weeks has not been as pleasant as we would expect as well.
He's starting to turn over the last couple of days. Had the big triple on Thursday. He's already been on base a couple of times here on Friday. We may be seeing it. It really looks like this is going to be a big up and down thing with him. But at his time, as recently as it was June 4th, I believe I tweeted, he was the 18th hitter in 5x5. And
Yeah,
that was only about 3 to 4 weeks after we had that conversation.
sure.
With that 2-week slump that we were worried about back then included, he was the 18th best hitter in 5x5 roto baseball. And of course, he's had about a 3-week slump this time. Looks like over the last couple of days, maybe he's coming out of it again. The stolen bases are there, though. This is
Yep.
up to 19. This is great.
I mean, that's what you're banking on. I mean, that's the type of player that you drafted. Anything else
I
on
just don't
top of
want the
that?
average hurting it as much as it has.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Um, but he besides like 1 or 2 games, he hasn't left that leadoff spot. So the Royals obviously continue to have confidence in him. So all like the rumors of like, oh, they can't keep him in this leadoff spot if he keeps doing this. Like, well, I'm gonna go ahead and trust the team that they see something we aren't on the field, and he turned
Well,
around
it's
once.
just like we talked before. The same as the last slump. He's hitting the ball hard. The problem is, as Mike Curlin pointed out a couple of days ago on Twitter, that ground ball rate is climbing, right? So we're not, he had 5 home runs a month and a half ago. He still has 5 home runs. And I misspoke. He has 20 stolen bases now because he does have one on Friday night as well.
There we go. I'll take it.
Yep.
Well, all right. We got those 2 slumping players. I got to throw those in the end of this first section here. We're going to move on to a couple of debuts, or at least expected debuts. We're going to talk about those guys right after this quick break. All right, Kevin. We got 2 hitters that we are expecting or have seen, and 2 pitchers that we definitely have already seen make their MLB debuts for this first Fab period. We're gonna start off with the hitter we haven't seen yet, and we're not expecting to see until Monday, as I realized again right before we started recording. And that is James Wood. He is set. And the only reason I know this is what I told you earlier. I get notifications from the MILB app for only one team, and that's my Indianapolis AAA team. And they happen to be playing in Rochester, the Nationals AAA team. And James Wood got a double and scored hit in a run from in that double. So I got a notification of the score change, and I'm like, wait a minute, James Wood is supposed to debut this weekend. Why is he doing playing in Rochester? And then I went back and reread the tweet and realized, oh, they've already announced that he will debut in DC, which great. That's how all debuts should be, to be honest with you. Like all debuts should be at home. But the fact that they made this announcement like 3 days in advance to not only give Wood the opportunity to realize what he's doing. Hopefully, he plays all weekend. He's playing in Rochester for the weekend, which is currently his home park. So hopefully that gets the home crowd excited about getting to the games over the weekend and seeing some more baseball and filling the stands, knowing that he's not going to be there ever again, probably. So that's cool. But also hopefully, nothing, terrible happens on the weekend leading up to his debut. We're not going to build a bid on him, but how excited are you? The fact that they made this kind of announcement in advance makes me think that this is expected to be a permanent fixture in the Nationals lineup for the remainder of the season. Do you feel the same way? Do you expect the same things that it would, pending obvious like production levels that we see going forward? Or do you think this is more of a fill-in and he'll kind of be up and down? What are your thoughts on Wood?
No, I think unless he completely flops, which is possible. We've seen that from some big time prospects this season, but that in their first taste at Major League Baseball, which we've been kind of spoiled over the last couple of years, but that's really the norm. Unless that happens, yeah, a team like Washington in the spot Washington is in doesn't make this call unless they are hoping it's permanent. Otherwise, they wait until September or the end of August. So he's still a rookie next season.
Right.
So, yeah, I fully expect him to be a near everyday player. He may get another breather or two more than most players will get right away. But I am very excited to see how this ends up and very excited to see how next week's Fab goes. We'll definitely be talking about him again next week. But I just think, yeah, it's we don't know. He's 21 years old. Yeah, but I think it was Eric Cross posted his last 162 games in the minor leagues, and he's got 10 home runs, 10 stolen bases this season in 185 at bats. OPS over one, over 1,000, however we want to say it. We talked about that last week as well. But I just, it's if he performs, and I think by performing, all of the numbers don't have to be great. I think if he's not overwhelmed, not striking out at well over 30% of the time, that he's here to stay and could be valuable. And with the injury to Jason Dominguez, this could be one of the last big ads we have in Fab this season.
Yeah, and the timing also kind of seems like it works out where he pretty much misses the Super 2 deadline.
Right.
And that get that extra
And they
control in
don't
that
even
fashion.
really look like right, they're getting that advantage without it looking like it's what they did because he was on the minor league IL and he's been back
Oh
for
yeah.
10 days tearing it up. All right, these 10 days got you to the big leagues, not the date.
Yep. Yeah, it just the fact that they added in those 3 extra days, they made the announcement. They're like, "Oh yeah, he's getting called up. We're gonna wait till July just to be on the safe side."
Yep.
And they're just not competing. Like to your point earlier, the whole rookie of the year thing obviously has got to play a factor, but the competition for rookie of the year has gotten so difficult to kind of measure and to predict. It's not worth it. I'm already going to get the extra year control. We might as well just get them up here, get as many hacks in the. It's like a free season for the Nationals, really, as far as that's concerned. So, yeah, love to see it. It would have been nice to have seen it at the beginning of the season, but I'm not I'm not really complaining at this point. All right, another bat we already did see, not like a huge name or anything like that, but the fact that he is called up making his debut, you got to take note of how they're treating him in Cleveland, and that is Jahan's. I knew I was gonna. I actually put the pronunciation here so I wouldn't mess it up, but I still mess it up. It's Jahan Kenzie Noel, first baseman prospect for the Cleveland Guardians. He was called up on Wednesday, did make his MLB debut, then has not started since, not starting the lineup on Thursday or Friday, but did start at first base, batted sixth for the Guardians on Wednesday. I mean, Kyle Manzardo was an option. You would assume to get called up. I don't believe he's injured to play first base. Not that he was playing a whole lot of first base when he was up before. And I think he's been down long enough where they could have called him back up. So what is it about Noel that got the Guardians to call him back up, and will he play enough for you to actually care?
I don't know. I didn't know who he was until Wednesday, and it was awesome. My wife doesn't dislike baseball, but she doesn't watch it. She doesn't follow it. She doesn't know much about it. She'll go to a live game with me and have a good time. But I showed her the video of his teammates watching him hit that home run in his first at bat, and she
Beautiful.
loved it. It was amazing. So much fun. But I just don't think we're going to see much, right? Between Josh Naylor, David Fry at first base and DH, I don't know how long he's with the team. And even if he does stick, I just don't see him getting consistent playing time at all. So much fun to watch on Wednesday. Hope we get to see more of that out of him. But I just at the moment don't see the playing time.
Yeah, I mean, I eventually, I mean, that's the main reason why Manzardo was sent back down as well. I mean, based on production, but he just wasn't getting the playing time. And it was a combination of the playing time not being there, and then also obviously not producing, not forcing their hand either. So to bring up somebody else, it seems as though this is more of a bench bat filler, that they didn't want Manzardo to fill that kind of a bench bat position. They expect a little bit more out of him moving forward.
Mhm.
So not exactly the spot they want to put him in. All right, like I said, we did get 2 pitching debuts. Let's start off with the debut in San Francisco, which debuted on Wednesday. This was the other Hayden that I alluded to earlier, Hayden Birdsong. He made his debut for the Giants, like I said, on Wednesday. And what's nice is I got these nice little links in here that I can bring up Nick Pollock's SP roundups, which is great because you can actually find these links right on their player pages on the Pitcher List
Yes.
site, both on like all the links to all the articles that all these players are mentioned in, but also on the game logs on the player pages. There's a link to every write up that's been done for that start. So it's a really great reference point there. 4 2/3 innings, 3 earned runs, 6 hits, 3 walks, 5 strikeouts, 28% CSW in the debut. I think the thing that stood out for me the most here is that he went 97 pitches. Granted, 4.2 innings, didn't go 5, but the fact that he still threw close to 100 pitches in his MLB debut is, both a testament to the Giants, kind of pushing him and making sure that, he gets, his time in the spotlight, but is also longevity to like get through the adversity. Did you see anything in this debut that made you interested to get him, in this Faab period? We've got another pitcher we're about to talk about. So the Faab bids are going to be spread around a little bit. Where is Birdsong going to be in your eyes when you make these bids?
Yeah, I'm a little bit interested. The results were not outstanding in the debut. Some strikeouts were there, and that's his calling card. All right, he's struck out a ton of guys throughout his minor league career, and he didn't obviously have as many as he had throughout the minors, but there were some strikeouts there. That's intriguing. What's also intriguing is they have an off day on Monday. So that allows them to skip their fifth starter. And roster resource, the way they have it lined out for this coming week, believes that is what will happen again, or will happen, that we won't see him, even though his turn in the rotation would come up on Tuesday. We may not see him till Saturday at Cleveland. Cleveland's offense has been much better this season than anybody anticipated. I don't even think even the most diehard Cleveland fans expected them to be this good offensively. And so if we don't see him until Saturday at Cleveland,
Yeah.
I I don't know that I have much interest at
Right.
this time. I think he's going to be a good major league pitcher, but this is something I might reevaluate at the All-Star break. In fact, I had the schedule pulled up earlier, and then that's exactly what I had it pulled up to look at, and then missed it. But it appears um that the following week they have another off day. So we won't see him until Minnesota next weekend. So his only two starts before the All-Star break at Cleveland and then against Minnesota. Two teams that have been hitting the snot out of the ball. So I think this is a wait and see for me. I know wait and see. I wait and see is something that I don't like because that means spending more money if the wait and see means I want him. But with the All-Star break coming up after those two matchups, I don't think I would use him. So, and unless in formats with ILs and you got plenty of roster space, then I can see adding him now and holding him until after the All-Star break. But in NFBC formats, with all the injuries, like we talked at the beginning of the show, I just don't have room for somebody like him.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder how they're gonna, deal with. I mean, right now, I'm again looking at that rotation. At least it's according to roster resource. Birdsong's number 3. I mean, he's in there in with just 4 options. So the fact that what other options are we expecting to see the Giants kind of fill in? They just sent down Mason Black. Yeah, they can bring him back up if there's like some kind of injury or anything like that. But if there's not, then he's stuck at least for it's a 10 or 15 days. Um, so I don't know how much ability they're going to have to do a lot of skipping unless they decide to do some bullpen games. And then honestly, Birdsong would probably be part of those quote unquote bullpen games. So not sure I trust the situation. I don't love the matchups that you just outlined as well. So if we do see him on regular rest and we hit those schedules positions, yeah, not the direction that I'm probably going on either. I have to be in a kind of a desperate situation. But I am personally much more interested in the other debut that happened. I'm sure I'm not the only one. Of course, I'm talking about David Festa in Minnesota making his debut against Arizona on Thursday. He went the full 5 innings, gave up a lot more runs, 5 earned runs. Luckily, the Minnesota offense had his back, and he walked away with the win. I think when he walked away, it was like 13-5 or something like 13-6
Yes,
at the point.
it
So
was.
he was a okay. Nice to walk away with the win in your MLB debut, regardless of what you actually brought to the table. But yeah, 5 innings, 7 hits, only 1 walk. Even though we probably saw a little bit of control issues that we thought could possibly be there, but the fastball looked really good. 21% CSW, not that not nothing eye popping. But only threw 78 pitches. So 78 pitches in those same 5 innings, a little bit more efficient than Birdsong, even though he let up all those runs. Minnesota has had some ins and outs with their rotation. Obviously, we've seen the staples kind of go in and out. Pablo Lopez, we saw, some Simeon Woods Richardson has come up. He's kind of stuck in the rotation, even though he's kind of had his ups and downs as far as production goes as well. Do you see the Twins keeping Festa around for a long period of time, if not the rest of the season? Or, what's your interest level here with Festa?
I'm very interested in Festa. A couple of reasons. The two matchups prior to the All-Star break, Detroit and the Chicago White Sox. Now, these matchups have burned me in a couple of spots recently. They're still overall really bad, but when they do score their runs, it's not
It's all at
two
once.
or 3 days of scoring 3 or 4 runs at a time, and they're scoring 9, 10 runs against starting pitchers every 10 days, right? That's all the runs they're scoring. They save them all up and just hammer one guy with them. That's what it seems like they've been doing. But I'm not running away from Detroit or the White Sox. And again, the Kraft, Saris, and Nick Pollock. Saris, they pretty much anytime I've heard him talk about the stuff of a pitcher, any pitcher in the minor leagues all season long, he compares him to David Festa. So that's added little intrigue here for me. The matchups are great. Yeah, they gave up the 5 runs, but I was very um I was very happy that they let him go the 5 innings, the 90 some pitches you mentioned, in spite of giving up the runs. They didn't really have the big lead, I don't think, until the fourth or fifth inning, but they just let him go. Like, this is what we're going to do. This is his debut. We're going to see what happens today. Love that. And then again, the 2 matchups he gets prior to the All-Star break, I am very interested. If he pitches well, or even dominates, which he quite possibly could in those 2 starts, I think he's in this rotation the rest of the season.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be. I mean, I know you talked about Birdsong having the strikeouts in the minors and whatnot, but I mean, I'm much more interested in Festa's ability to miss bats. He didn't miss a lot of them in this debut, but we'll chalk that up to a debut. From all accounts, though, that fastball is going to, as Nick guaranteed in his SB roundup,
Yes.
that it will earn whiffs, and that will lead to obviously more strikeouts down the line. And in fantasy, that's what you're looking for. And we will continue to look for recommendations in those categories when we get to that, Kevin. We are going to get to our Faab recommendations right after this quick break. All right, we are back. You are still listening to On the Wire. And if you're watching us at home on the Twitter or on the YouTube, thank you so much for joining us. We just hit up a bunch of news, including a bunch of debuts we either expecting or have seen already, and we will be fabbing them this weekend. But there's a whole bunch of news that we didn't talk about, and you should be listening or watching Nick Pollock's stream on playback.tv/Pitcher List on his daily stream. He also does his SP Roundup podcast, the Plus Pitch podcast, in that stream as well. You can listen to that wherever you're listening to your podcast. And of course, Casey Bubba and Jake Crumpler on the First Pitch podcast, where they talk about every piece of news that you might need to know about to win your fantasy leagues, and everything you need to know to update your lineups and change, anything you need to know. So make sure you're listening to those podcasts as well, wherever you're listening to this one. Kevin, we do need to spend some more Faab dollars, so let's get into the hitting categories as we typically will do. Home runs, RBIs, lead us off here with some power. What are we looking at as far as power is as it's available on your wires?
You must have looked at the name that I have here in the outline when you said as available, because I don't have a deep league guy really at all. I've been scouring this all week. I have some teams where I could use some power in 15 team leagues, and I'm having a hard time. I will continue to look. If I find anybody by Sunday that we don't talk about today, I'll try to tweet it out there. But Jock Peterson is universally rostered almost everywhere, available in just a handful of 12-team leagues. I don't think he should be. He should be 100% rostered even in 12-teamers. Arizona faces 6 righties this coming week in 2 of the best home run parks this season, Los Angeles and San Diego. So I'm expecting a big week from Jock Peterson, and that 92% in 12 teamers should be 100% for this coming week. The other one does have availability in 12 teamers, only 34% rostered, so available in 2/3 of 12 team leagues, and that's Michael Toglia. And as we will talk here in just a little bit, Colorado is home for a 7-game week, and Toglia has been going well over the last 2 to 3 weeks, even over the past month. We're starting to see the home runs, the RBIs. The best part is we're seeing the playing time. He is the everyday first baseman versus both righties and lefties, at least has been for quite some time now. So in those 12-team leagues, I think that's what people aren't realizing. Toglia is playing every day. He is a 12-team viable power hitter right now. Deeper leagues, anybody I could come up with, just I don't know about the playing time. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, I brought up Hunter Renfroe when he We know how streaky he is. When he gets streaky, he earns more playing time. He has a home run on Friday night. Maybe if that he carries that through the weekend, we'll see him more next week. I will look at that for my 15-team leagues where I need power. But it's getting tough out there in the deep leagues.
Yeah, as it tends to do, especially with all the injuries that keep piling up in those leagues that you don't have IL
Mm.
spots, which forces people to make difficult decisions of stashing the really good players, and then they still have to pick up players to kind of fill their benches and fill their lineups. It really cuts down on the availability of players out there for if you need them. All right, so we've got, if you've got Michael Garcia, at least you got your stolen base in that category. But if you need some more, Kevin, stolen bases, runs scored, of course, into our speed category. Who are you eyeing this week?
I'm looking at Bryce Johnson. I think he's been stealing some bags and he's been getting some playing time, and it looks like he should, from what I'm seeing so far, have that playing time be pretty safe for this upcoming week. This is a name that I surprised myself with a little bit when I was looking for who I would want to add this weekend in for speed, and I am definitely interested and going to be giving him an even more intense look, and I think he's at least gonna be in my waterfall bids, even if he's not at the top. He's not gonna cost much, 0% rostered, and I like Bryce Johnson. Like we talk about in this category quite often, many of the other players that we have talked about throughout the season, I'm every week, Tyron Blanco, and he's got another stolen base this week, hasn't started. He started 1 game, but he's got us a stolen base already. With the weekend left to go, Royals are playing in Colorado next weekend for a 3-game series, looking to face 2 lefties. That might even get him a couple of starts. And for a player like him, it's not how the ball flies, it's how much room there is for the ball to drop. We'll definitely have Tyron Blanco in some lineups next weekend.
Yeah, the Bryce Johnson was interesting because obviously he just called up and got
Mhm.
3 straight starts against lefties for San
That
Diego. Still started on Friday against a righty as well, so it's a good
that's what caught
sign.
my eye,
Yeah,
exactly.
that's a good
I
sign
did
that
not
things to
expect
come.
him to see in there on Friday, and when he was, I was like, "Oh, this is
Okay,
nice."
okay. And then we have 2 more days to see what happens throughout the rest of the weekend, to see if that playing time or at least that pattern sticks around. All right, opportunities heading into next week. Things to keep in mind as far as the schedule goes. There are a handful of teams with 7 games, including Toronto. I can say words: Toronto, Houston, the New York Mets, Washington, Milwaukee, and Colorado. Nobody has 2 off days, and nobody's single off day is in a weird spot. So it's either the Monday or the Thursday.
This
The
is all
standard,
thanks to having a holiday on Thursday.
and that
Nobody has Thursday off.
yeah, everybody plays on the 4th. So that's nice to see. Get your fireworks ready and your flag hats on. And then Colorado gets to play all of their home games in Denver for 7 games, 4 against Milwaukee and 4 against your Royals. So that'll be fun to watch. Those teams get to have the thin air of Colorado. Cincinnati is on the road to start it off against the Yankees, so another hitter-friendly park there, and then 3 back home against the Tigers. So the Tigers get to take advantage of Great American Small Park, which I will say I tweeted this out as I was there this past Sunday.
I saw that.
In
Yeah,
the top, I was in the top section. We're not spending a whole lot of money on these tickets, but nothing about that stadium looks small. Um, like I understand the dimensions, I understand where it comes from. But I didn't look it up, but there's a ton of seats. Like it's a big stadium. It's not a Fenway, it's not a Wrigley for sure. It was actually pretty nice. It's right on the water. I don't think that stadium gets enough credit out there on a regular basis. So I will give Great American Small Park a little bit of a shout out there. It was and as a family, it's like as somebody who went with both my kids and my wife, it was by far the most family friendly ballpark I had ever been to. Like multiple playgrounds, multiple like things for kids to be occupied with, especially kids that are like under the age of 10, that can't possibly sit through an entire 9 innings, even with the shorter game times that we're seeing nowadays. So that was very much so a welcome sight. Plus, it rained a little bit to start the game, so giving them something to do. It was so shout out to the Reds for kind of dedicating a whole corner of the ballpark to families and kind of addressing that kind of a situation.
Very
So
nice.
yeah, it was a good time, and the Red Sox won, so that was nice too. Uh, so with all of that in mind, Kevin, anything else that you might have noticed as far as matchups or what have you? Who looks like they could be taking advantage of an opportunity for this coming week?
Yeah, a guy we've talked about in this category a couple of times this season, but at the time, he was a small side platoon guy with a lot of matchups versus lefties coming up, and he's come through for us. Come through for us, he's also come through for the San Diego Padres and playing every day now. Donovan Solano. 33% rostered in 15-team main events, 1% 12-team leagues. You can probably do better in 12-team leagues, but multi-positional eligibility, even in 12s, there may be spots where he can be helpful. San Diego's starting to score some runs. Again, I didn't get to watch as much baseball as I typically like to this week, but we talked about Noel earlier and how cool that was to see the Jurickson Profar uh, getting thrown at, Manny Machado hitting a home run with the next at bat, and then Profar hitting a grand slam later in the game. San Diego's got their vibe going, so they're scoring runs. I like Donovan Solano, especially in the 15s where he is available in 2/3 of leagues. The other one, only available in about 20% of the deeper leagues, but nearly half of 12-team leagues. He's 55% rostered in OCs. That's Sal Frelick in Milwaukee. He's been playing every day with, Milwaukee's had injuries in and out throughout the season. They seem pretty stable right now at the moment. He's in there every day, and he's been performing very well. His overall season numbers are pretty good, but over the last month, they're even better.
Yeah, I was looking at Milwaukee the other day, and I really wanted
Oh,
Blake
yeah, I
Perkins.
forgot. We just talked about it, but Sal Frelick's in Colorado for 4 games this week as well. I almost forgot that part.
Yeah, that's definitely going to be a point to notice. But like, yeah, I was looking at Milwaukee's lineup earlier this week, and like, I really wanted Blake Perkins to be a thing, and then I realized, like, no, that outfield has been pretty set. And Perkins is playing,
Right.
a decent amount. He's getting, 2 days off here, 2 days off there, but on and off. But yeah, it's like it's just getting into that outfield. Obviously Perkins can play center field. That's all he plays when he does play. But the rest of that threesome in the outfield has been pretty set between Churio, Yelich
Yeah, we
and
might see Frelick sit against lefties as he did on Tuesday, but for the most part, he's been in there.
yeah. All right, awesome. So we got a decent amount of hitters to think about. It gets a little thin this time of year, as we expect. Maybe if James Wood is not, on your radar for next week, or you can't afford him, you need to start making those moves this week. Keep that in mind as well. Your budget plays a bigger role each and every week. Let's get into some pitchers, and we are going to hit on all those pitching categories and then some right after this quick break. All right, Kevin, get right into our wins in case our volume stats for our pitchers. You always have a nice long list of names to consider here because you have to, right? You have to. You never
Right.
know what that rostership percentage. You might tell us, hey, this guy's available in 98% of leagues, and you'll be in that 2% where it's not available. So it's always good to know your options here. Hit us up with a list of those options for this coming week.
Yep. Once again, anybody with a matchup that I'm not completely running away from and has some availability at all. I've listed, and it's a pretty short list this week, even with that caveat. Jonathan Cannon, we saw him have two amazing starts and then get blown up in 1 1/3 innings last time out. I think we can expect maybe not as good as those first two starts, or the two previous starts, I should say. He had been up with the White Sox prior, but Jonathan Cannon, 56% rostered in main events. Only was it 9%? Is that what I had written down? Yeah, only 9% in 12s, and he may be viable at Miami, right? Horrible offense, horrible hitters ballpark. So I do like Jonathan Cannon this week. He gets Rocky Road on Saturday, so he may have already been picked up in even some shallow leagues, daily moves leagues. But when people drop him after that Colorado start on Saturday, go ahead and grab him a couple of days early for the Miami start next weekend. Some people even they churned that much that even a guy like him, they'll drop after the Colorado start, even when he gets Miami next. So that's something to keep an eye on for sure. We talked about David Festa. I did write him down here earlier before I saw what you had in our news and notes section. So we've already covered David Festa, available everywhere, probably going to be a little expensive. And this is what I was going to talk about at the end of the show, Adam, but I think it fits in right here with Festa. We've been hearing a lot this year, each week, from Todd Whitestone. Right? We love his Faab article that goes out every Monday on what did happen and how much Faab people have left. We're to almost $200 on average per player of money remaining, more than fantasy players had this time last season. Everybody's saving their money. It's time to start spending some of it, right? I talked about Jason Dominguez now. We're not saving our money from him anymore.
Nope.
We might only see him for 2 weeks this season, if at all, right? So we're going to start spending some money. I'm not talking big money. I'm not saying I'm going to go bid $300 on David Festa, but I'm going to start bumping my bids a little bit. If everybody's trying to save money, I'm going to bump mine. I think the exact number that Zach Waxman put out on Monday was $179 more on average than we had last season at this time left in Fab. So it's just bumping my weekly number up a little bit, trying to get some of my top guys, and not necessarily settling for guys in my waterfall, for guys like David Festa. So might bump my bids up a little bit on him this week. Um, he he gets Detroit this week. I don't think we talked about this. We did talk about Detroit, but he'd get a two-step the week before the All-Star break at the Chicago White Sox and at San Francisco. So three nice matchups going into the All-Star break for David Festa, if indeed he does perform well versus Detroit. And we do see him next week. A guy we've talked about almost every week, Spencer Arrighetti. His results have been up and down a little bit. He's 91% rostered in 15 teamers, but only 19% in 12s at Toronto and at Minnesota. Those matchups are a little iffy, but I thought it was warranted here. Like he would be towards the bottom of my options, and even on teams where I roster him, I might be looking for someone else. But he has performed well at times throughout the season. Here's a guy that's available everywhere, and we don't know for certain we're going to see him for this two-step, but it looks like we'll see Roansy Contreras at Oakland and then at the Chicago Cubs. We know about Oakland. These two teams are kind of flipped in my mind a little bit, right? We still have the narrative that Oakland's terrible, but they can be dangerous. They're hitting a lot of home runs this season. They're not winning a lot of games. They're hitting home runs. The Chicago Cubs, who earlier in the season had a nice little stretch where they were performing well, they have been really bad over the past month offensively. It's not just their bullpen. JP Sears has availability because I'm sure a lot of people like me finally dropped him after that 9-run outing he had last time out, and he hadn't been
Sure.
very good in the few starts leading up to that. But I'm picking him back up for the start against the Angels, I believe. I forgot to write it down here in the notes, but I think it's the Angels. I will pick him back up in spots this week. David Peterson gets a two-step. Same old David Peterson, strikeouts in good matchups. We're worried about the walks. He's at Washington and at Pitt. I'll take a chance with his
They'll help
walk
out.
rate in those
Yeah.
two matchups. And Martin Perez, and he gets St. Louis. He's been up and down. We know he's not the same guy he was in 2022, but he's had some good starts this season. He's available almost everywhere. He gets St. Louis, who over the last 30 days is 29th out of 30 teams in Major League Baseball versus left-handed pitching in both OPS and WRC plus. So picking on St. Louis with a lefty there. Another guy that's been up and down, 100% rostered in main events, but available in nearly a third of 12-team leagues. Kyle Gibson, he is at Pitt and at Washington. Love those matchups. So hopefully, there's a couple of guys there that are available in a lot of spots. Of course, David Festa will cost more money, but there's the Martin Perez, Rosie Contreras, and then with the guys that are more heavily rostered, with hopefully you can find one or two of them where you need them. That's the spot I've been in every week. Hopefully, one or two of these guys is available.
Yeah, the thing with Festa is, yeah, he's gonna be expensive, but he very well might be worth it because this is based on especially the matchups that at least it looks like he's going to get prior to the All Star break are nice enough where you expect him to stay with Minnesota. You're going to get 3 starts out of him. This isn't just a stream. You're not just grabbing David Peterson because he has a great two-step. And you expect to drop David Peterson
And
the
a
week.
9 ERA can hold prices down a little bit, hopefully.
That's true. That's true. That 9 in that column is here's hoping. Obviously, check the budget
Exactly.
that the rest of the other 11 or 14 teams in your league have when making your bids as well. All right, so a lot of starters to consider based on the matchups. As you mentioned, a lot of names in there that you've already dropped, but you're willing to pick them back up. JP Sears specifically there, based on these matchups alone, especially in these 15 teamers, as you know, Nick Pollock will always call them the Tobies, are out there. They're worth holding on to when they have the right matchups. So you got to play that. You got to play that game as best you can. But some of these guys might blow up your ratios, so we got to take into account the options that are out there too, Kevin, that can help at least bring it down a little bit more, even in small spurts. I will throw out the name that Uncle Ted threw out earlier in our chat
Mhm.
here. Porter Hodge in Chicago, the Cubs called him up somewhat recently. He's been getting a lot more innings as of late, and just factored into the save opportunity here in Chicago in the 10th inning. Hector Nery still closed out the ninth with a clean ninth inning. So I'm not expecting Hodge to come in there and take saves, though, anybody could really do that in Chicago at this point. But if Hodge can continue to put up good numbers as far or clean innings, especially late in games, his role could at least expand and get more innings. And, obviously that volume is going to play dividends. And he is definitely a high strikeout type of reliever. So he can add in that realm as well. Not somebody I'm saying you need to pick up this week at all, but we always talk about guys you want to keep on this little watch list when you're looking for these relievers based on their usage. And if the Cubs bring up his usage in the next week or two, might be somebody you want to keep an eye on leading up to the All-Star break or right after as well. Kevin, any other relievers out there or anybody that can fit into this ratio category?
Yeah, guy to add to our list. Like we've been saying each week, everybody we've talked about throughout the season, and as long as they are still getting their innings and uh, haven't been injured, they're all guys to consider. I think Taylor Scott in Houston is going overlooked. I know I was overlooking him. I'd seen him pitch quite often. I watch quite a bit of Houston Astros baseball, but when you have Josh Hader and you have Ryan Presley and you have Brian Abreu, you kind of get overlooked as a bullpen guy that's fourth on the list. But he has a 1.63 ERA on the season, and I put 38 and change innings. So he on the higher end of what we see out of a lot of relievers. He's on average for over 75 innings, 75 to 80. That 1.63 RA, 1.03 whip, but over his last 18 appearances, that goes back to, I believe, May 8th, he's a 0.81 ERA. I believe he's given up one run in that time, maybe two. 22 innings pitched in 18 appearances, and 3 wins he's snagged in this time. It's been a while since we talked about that, but for a while in this category, I was always adding. I'm kind of angling for the guys I think can get a win as well. He has not pitched since Tuesday. He does go multiple innings at times, but he also goes less than an inning at times. He's their situational guy, but it has enabled him to pick up 3 wins as well, most of them fairly recently. So Taylor Scott, another guy to add to this waterfall list, and if he gets in the game tonight, so we don't see him Saturday and Sunday, he moves up the list.
So yeah, he did pitch today already. He was the first man up.
Beautiful.
Only pitched a third of an inning, only got one out. So not really hitting, not hurting
Mm.
his chances to.
Then I think I want to see him tomorrow. Houston is one of the teams with a 7-game week.
Right.
So
So you either
I just
don't want
don't
to
I
see him
don't
at
want to save him
all.
for Sunday.
Yeah, you either don't see him at all this weekend or a very short outing on Saturday. But
Right.
yeah, got the clean out at the I think it was the top of the 6th inning or bottom of the 6th inning, whatever, the last out of the 6th inning, coming in for Blanco. But so yeah, like you're right. These guys, these teams with really solid bullpens all around. We talked about so many Milwaukee bullpen pieces throughout this season so far. Obviously, Houston has a plethora of guys at the top end of their bullpen. It's really easy to forget that just because you're the third or fourth guy in line there doesn't mean you don't have value as long as you're still producing in the right circumstances, and the team is giving you those circumstances as well. So Taylor Scott, another name to add to the pile, because not all of these guys that we've mentioned all season continue to have a perfect record all the way down. All right, but we do need to look for some relievers who could vulture a save or two, or are worth a stash, thinking that they might take a role. Obviously, picking Porter Hodge out of the needle in the haystack, possibly in the Chicago Cubs bullpen. Sure, it's a name. I don't expect it to happen anytime soon. Do you see any other situations out there worth speculating on?
Several, but nothing specific. Especially the National League, right? Almost everybody's still in contention, but we're going to start seeing the trade deadline moves. It's only a month away, 2 weeks to the All-Star break, 1 month till the trade deadline. We're going to start seeing those moves. I really don't know who specifically I would be looking at this weekend, but the usual suspects. Of course, the injury to Bednar means that Aroldis Chapman was picked up everywhere last week, but we expect to see Tanner Scott moved, so we can start specking in Miami. We expect to see maybe Carlos Estevez. I've seen his name on a lot of the trade rumors articles. So Luis Garcia out in Anaheim is a name that I would look at. And this is the time of year that I really make sure I don't miss Rick Graham and the other reliever article writers at Pitcher List articles. This is where you start picking up some of the guys from the teams that we think we're going to see their closer be moved.
And yeah, I'm also more interested too in like the closers, like the Tanner Scotts of the world, who are all but guaranteed to be moved. Right, he's in the final year of arbitration, if I'm not mistaken,
Mhm.
and so he has got no control there. Does he?
Uncle Ted's got a good name here.
Does
Trent
he?
Thornton's been getting some of the saves in Seattle. Yeah.
There you go. But does Tanner Scott keep the closer job? Does he get moved to a situation that has a volatile in a contender who has a volatile situation and take over that role like a Kimbrel did in the past, or like other guys that have, Jansen got
Because
moved
if
and
he
what have you.
doesn't, we're going to start losing closers as
And that's
well.
that's
That's,
what I'm more worried about.
yeah. It's time to worry about that and try to spec on that. Yes.
Right, exactly. All right, cool. So we're still at a time where we can worry about our wild card situations, even if you are struggling with your IL situation in your non-IL leagues. So Kevin, give me somebody to spec on in this wild card section.
Well, it can't be James Wood,
No.
but we like him. But I am looking at another big name this week. And again, I brought his name up earlier. Eric Cross was tweeting about him this week. Love what he does with prospects. I think most everybody does. And he's really banging the Kobe Mayo drum. We know we've seen all these guys come up for Baltimore. We've seen some of them go back down. We've seen Kierstead back up and performing better this time, getting more playing time this time. What comes first, the chicken or the egg? We don't know which one is affecting which there, but he's really banging this Kobe Mayo drum. And when you're looking at what he's doing in the minor leagues, there's absolutely nothing. It's almost like you think it's detrimental to their development, right? Just to keep performing against play other players that he's dominating. I think it's almost a disservice to his development to not get him facing major league pitching soon.
Hmm. There's definitely something to be said about that, right? It's like we talk about. I mean, I think about it with pitchers all the time. It's like you only have so many bullets in the arm. Use
Absolutely.
them where they count, where you can get the most experience out of it. But I mean, the same, yeah, the hitters are the same thing, especially if you're just seeing the same types of pitches and the same quality of pitches. You're not getting the experience of facing major league hitter or major league pitchers who have a wider range of an arsenal. They've fine tuned a lot of their pitches and their strategies as well. So yeah, you
Not only do
can.
we have ABS at AAA, they're changing the ABS in some of the AAA leagues of how they're doing it. It just get them out of there.
Yep,
Get them up seeing the major leaguers.
there you go. All right. Well, that's a lot of names to consider and names you're going to have to consider for next week as we keep mentioning James Wood. As always, he might have been drafted in some leagues and he might have been dropped. He
It's
might
worth
have
looking.
already be
Yes.
available.
And we've talked about it before, that amazing feature on NFBC
Yep.
leagues now, free agency. Because if he was drafted, he'll be listed, but if he wasn't, he won't be listed. He won't even come up. You can just hit free agency on his player tab, and you'll know right away if he was drafted and dropped in any of your leagues.
Yeah. So keep an eye on that for sure. Kevin, any other added final thoughts? I know you kind of hit on it earlier on in the show, but is there anything else you want to leave us with on top of that?
That and kind of related to last week where I my typical all the little things add up to a big thing. It's this is the grind part of the season, right? And this is next weekend's a big holiday weekend for a lot of people. And a lot of people will think not necessarily I can take the All-Star break off, but I think the week prior and the week after the All-Star break are two huge weeks for those that are going to spend more time on their teams than many other people will. Just keep grinding.
Keep grinding. That's the name of the game. It's a long season. We're just about halfway through it. So that means you got a whole nother
Our
half
teams
to go.
are. 79 to 83 games are what teams have played when I
There you
looked this morning prior to today. So some teams have reached the halfway point.
Then here we are at the halfway point ourselves. That means we have a whole nother half to go.
Exactly.
All right, with all that, that is going to wrap it up for episode 170 of On the Wire. You can follow myself on the Twitter at 80 grade. That's all spelled out. Kevin is at Hastings Kevin. Of course, follow the pod itself at On the Wire Pod. For all that, I am Adam Howe on behalf of Kevin Hastings. Thanks for listening, and we bid you goodbye.